The gunshot that shattered the afternoon stillness sent a flock of crows scattering from the cottonwood trees, and Emma Hartley dropped to her knees in the dusty street of Redemption, Texas, clutching her swollen belly as blood bloomed across the shoulder of her calico dress. It was August 1878, and the heat hung over the small frontier town like a wool blanket, shimmering in waves off the parched earth. The bullet had come from somewhere in the chaos of the bank robbery happening behind her, a wild shot from one of the three masked men who had stormed into the First National Bank of Redemption just minutes before. Emma had been walking past, returning from the general store with fabric for baby clothes, when all hell broke loose. The pain in her shoulder was sharp and burning, but it was nothing compared to the terror that seized her heart as she felt a strange cramping low in her abdomen. She was 7 months along, and this baby was everything to her, the only piece of hope she had left after her husband Thomas had died 6 months earlier from pneumonia. Thomas had been a good man, a farmer trying to make something of the harsh land outside town, and his death had left her alone and struggling. She had moved into a small room above the seamstress shop, taking in mending and washing to survive, counting down the days until she could hold her child in her arms. Now, lying in the street with dust in her mouth and blood seeping through her fingers, Emma felt that hope slipping away like water through a sieve. "Help," she tried to call out, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. The shooting continued inside the bank, and people were running, screaming, diving for cover. Nobody seemed to notice the pregnant widow bleeding in the street, except for one man. Garrett Mackenzie had been watering his horse at the trough outside the saloon when the first shot rang out. At 32 years old, he had been a cowboy for more than half his life, driving cattle up the Kishom Trail, breaking horses, doing whatever work needed doing across Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that fell past his collar. His eyes were a striking blue-green, the color of shallow creek water, and they had seen more than their fair share of violence and sorrow. He had no family to speak of, his parents having died when he was 15, leaving him to make his own way in the world. He had never stayed in one place long enough to put down roots, never let himself care too deeply about anything or anyone. It was easier that way, safer. But something about the sight of that woman crumpled in the street made every muscle in his body go taut with purpose. Garrett ran toward Emma without thinking, keeping low as more shots rang out. He reached her in seconds, dropping to his knees beside her. "Ma'am, I have got you," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Up close, he could see she was young, maybe 22 or 23, with dark brown hair escaping from its pins and hazel eyes wide with fear and pain. And she was very pregnant. "My baby," Emma gasped, clutching at his arm with surprising strength. "Please, my baby." Garrett saw the blood on her shoulder and the way she was curled protectively around her belly. He did not hesitate. He scooped her up in his arms as gently as he could manage while still moving fast, and carried her away from the bank, away from the gunfire, toward the doctor's office 3 buildings down. "Stay with me," he said, looking down at her face. "What is your name?" "Emma," she whispered. "Emma Hartley." "Emma, I am Garrett. You are going to be all right, you and your baby both." He did not know if that was true, but he said it anyway because she needed to hear it, and because somewhere deep in his chest he felt a fierce determination to make it true. The doctor's office was mercifully close. Garrett kicked the door open and carried Emma inside, calling out for Doc Patterson. The elderly physician appeared from the back room, taking in the scene with experienced eyes. "Gunshot?" Doc Patterson asked, already moving to clear his examination table. "Yes, sir. In the shoulder, but she is expecting, and I think something might be wrong." Doc Patterson nodded grimly and gestured for Garrett to lay Emma on the table. As soon as he stepped back, the doctor began his examination, cutting away the blood-soaked fabric of her dress to expose the wound. "The bullet went clean through," Doc Patterson said after a moment. "That is good, but the baby." Emma cried out then, a sound of such raw anguish that Garrett felt it like a physical blow. "Please," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "Please do not let my baby die. I cannot lose this baby. It is all I have left." Doc Patterson worked quickly, his wrinkled hands steady as he cleaned and bandaged Emma's shoulder. But his expression grew more concerned as he examined her belly, pressing gently, listening with his stethoscope. "The baby's heartbeat is there, but it is fast. Too fast," he said quietly. "And you are having contractions. The shock and trauma from the gunshot may have triggered early labor." "No," Emma whispered, her face going pale. "It is too soon. 2 months too soon." "I need to get her upstairs to the recovery room," Doc Patterson said to Garrett. "This is going to be a long night." Garrett found himself nodding, found himself helping to move Emma again, this time up the narrow staircase to the small room the doctor kept for patients who needed extended care. It had a single bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the main street. They could still hear shouting from outside as the sheriff and his deputies dealt with the bank robbers. Once Emma was settled in the bed, Doc Patterson turned to Garrett. "You should go. There is nothing you can do here." But Garrett looked at Emma, saw the fear in her eyes, saw how small and alone she looked in that bed, and he shook his head. "I will stay, if that is all right with you, ma'am." Emma looked at him, this stranger who had saved her life, and something passed between them, some wordless understanding. "Please," she said softly, "I do not want to be alone." So Garrett stayed. He pulled a chair up beside her bed and sat down, his hat in his hands. Doc Patterson gave him a long look but said nothing, just went about his work preparing for what might come. As the afternoon faded into evening, Emma's condition worsened. The contractions came stronger and more frequent, and with each one her fear grew. Garrett found himself taking her hand, letting her squeeze as hard as she needed when the pain hit. "Tell me about your husband," he said during a lull, thinking she needed a distraction. "What was he like?" Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she spoke. "Thomas was kind, quiet, he loved the land, loved working with his hands. We had only been married a year when he got sick." She paused, swallowing hard. "He never even knew about the baby. I found out a week after we buried him." Garrett felt a tightness in his chest. "I am sorry for your loss." "He would have been a good father," Emma said, her voice breaking, "and now this baby might never." She could not finish the sentence. "Do not think like that," Garrett said firmly. "Your baby is going to be fine." But as the night wore on, even he began to doubt those words. The contractions grew worse, and Emma's pain became almost unbearable. Doc Patterson looked increasingly worried, checking and rechecking the baby's heartbeat. Around midnight, Emma's water broke. Doc Patterson's face grew grave. "The baby is coming," he said, "whether we are ready or not." The next hours were the longest of Garrett's life. He had seen men die on the trail, had witnessed all manner of hardship and suffering, but nothing had prepared him for this, for watching Emma fight for her baby's life with every breath, every push, every cry of pain. "I am scared," Emma sobbed at one point, looking up at Garrett with eyes that were pools of terror. "I am scared my baby will not survive." Without thinking, Garrett leaned down close, framing her sweat-dampened face with his hands. "Listen to me, Emma. You are the strongest person I have ever met. And your baby is a fighter just like you. Do not give up. Do not you dare give up." But Emma was shaking her head, her whole body trembling with exhaustion and fear. "I cannot do this. It is too hard. It hurts too much." "Yes, you can," Garrett said fiercely. Then, surprising himself, he added, "Let me pray with you." Garrett was not a particularly religious man. He had been to church as a boy before his parents died, but he had fallen out of the habit over the years. Still, in that moment, prayer seemed like the only thing left, the only weapon against the terrible uncertainty of what was happening. He held Emma close as he could with her in the bed and him kneeling beside it, and he bowed his head. "Lord, I do not talk to you much, and I do not know if you are listening. But this woman here, Emma, she is good and she is brave and she has already lost so much. Please do not take this baby from her. Please let this child live. Give Emma the strength she needs." Give Doc Patterson the skill to help them both, and if you need to take something in return, take it from me. I am asking you, begging you, please let this baby survive." His voice cracked on the last words, and he was surprised to find his eyes were burning with unshed tears. When had he started to care so much? He barely knew this woman. But somehow, in the space of these terrible hours, something had shifted in him. Something fundamental had changed. Emma was crying too, but she reached up with a trembling hand and touched his face. "Thank you," she whispered. Doc Patterson cleared his throat. "All right, Emma. On the next contraction, I need you to push as hard as you can. This baby needs to come now." What followed was a blur of pain and effort and prayer. Garrett held Emma's hand, whispered encouragement in her ear, wiped her face with a cool cloth, and prayed silently over and over for this baby to live. Emma pushed with everything she had left, crying out, gasping for air, her whole body straining. And then, just as the first light of dawn began to creep through the window, a thin, reedy cry filled the room. "It is a boy," Doc Patterson said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have a son, Emma." Emma collapsed back against the pillows, sobbing with relief and exhaustion. Garrett felt his own tears finally spill over as he watched Doc Patterson wrap the tiny baby in a clean blanket. The infant was so small, so impossibly small, with wrinkled red skin and a shock of dark hair. "Is he all right?" Emma asked urgently, trying to sit up. "Please, is he all right?" Doc Patterson brought the baby to her, placing him carefully in her arms. "He is early and he is small. The next few days will be critical, but he is breathing on his own and his color is good. He has got a fighting chance." Emma looked down at her son, her face transformed by a love so pure and intense it was almost painful to witness. "Hello, little one," she whispered, touching the baby's tiny fist. "Hello, my sweet boy." The baby's eyes were closed, but his little mouth moved, rooting instinctively toward his mother. Emma laughed through her tears and looked up at Garrett, and in that moment he felt something shift in his heart, something he had never felt before. "Thank you," Emma said to him, her eyes shining. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for praying with me. I do not think I could have done this without you." Garrett did not trust himself to speak. He just nodded, reaching out to touch the baby's head with one gentle finger. The dark hair was as soft as dandelion fluff. "What will you name him?" he asked after a moment, his voice rough. Emma looked back down at her son, considering. "Samuel," she said softly. "Samuel Thomas Hartley, after my father and my husband." "It is a good name," Garrett said. Strong, Doc Patterson was cleaning up, looking relieved but still concerned. "Emma, you need to rest now, and Samuel needs to eat. Let me help you with that, and then both of you need to sleep." Garrett stood, knowing he should leave now, should let Emma and her new baby have some privacy and rest, but he found he did not want to go. He wanted to stay right there to make sure they were both all right, to be there if they needed anything. "Go home and get some sleep," Doc Patterson said, reading Garrett's hesitation. "You have done more than enough. Emma and the baby will be here when you wake up." Reluctantly, Garrett nodded. He looked at Emma one more time, at the way she was gazing at her son with such fierce love, and he felt something warm and bittersweet in his chest. "I will come back later," he said, "if that is all right." "I would like that," Emma said softly, meeting his eyes. "I would like that very much." Garrett left the doctor's office and stepped out into the early morning light. The town was quiet now, the excitement of the bank robbery long over. He learned later that all 3 robbers had been caught or killed, and the money recovered. The sheriff had been looking for Emma to get her statement about being shot, but that could wait. Garrett walked to the boarding house where he had been staying for the past week while he looked for work. He had been planning to move on soon, to head north to Montana, where he had heard there were ranches hiring for the fall roundup. But now, as he lay down on his narrow bed still wearing his dusty clothes, he found himself thinking that maybe, just maybe, he might stay in redemption a little while longer. He slept for a few hours, but his dreams were full of Emma's frightened eyes and the sound of that baby's first cry. When he woke in the late morning, he washed up, changed his shirt, and headed back to the doctor's office. Doc Patterson met him at the door. "They are both sleeping," he said quietly, "but you can go up and sit with them if you like. I think Emma would want that." Garrett climbed the stairs as quietly as he could and eased open the door to the recovery room. Emma was asleep in the bed, looking pale and exhausted but peaceful. The baby, Samuel, was wrapped in a blanket beside her, so tiny he barely made a bump under the covers. Garrett pulled the chair up beside the bed and sat down, content to just watch them sleep, to make sure they kept breathing. It seemed like such a fragile thing, life. He had never really thought about it that way before. Emma woke about an hour later, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw Garrett sitting there, she smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. "You came back," she said, her voice hoarse. "I said I would." Emma shifted carefully, wincing at the pain in her shoulder. "How long was I asleep?" "A few hours." "Doc Patterson says you need to rest as much as possible." "I know." Emma looked down at her baby and her expression softened. "He is so beautiful, I keep thinking I might wake up and this will all have been a dream." "He is real," Garrett assured her, "and he is perfect." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Emma said, "Tell me about yourself, Garrett. I know your name and that you are a cowboy, but that is all." "Where are you from?" Garrett leaned back in his chair, considering how much to share. He was not used to talking about himself. But something about Emma made him want to open up, to let her see past the walls he usually kept up. "I was born in Missouri," he began. "My parents had a small farm there. I was the only child. When I was 15, there was a fire. The house burned down with my parents inside. I tried to save them, but I could not." Even after all these years, saying it out loud still hurt. Emma's eyes filled with sympathy. "I am so sorry, that must have been terrible." "It was a long time ago," Garrett said, though of course it was not really, not in the ways that mattered. "After that, I headed west. Started working ranches, driving cattle, whatever I could find. I have been moving around ever since." "Do you like it, the moving around?" Garrett thought about that. "I used to think I did. I liked the freedom, not being tied down to any one place. But lately—" He trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. "Lately what?" Emma prompted gently. "Lately I have been thinking maybe I am just running. From the memories, from the pain of losing my folks. Maybe I have been running for so long I do not even know how to stop anymore." Emma reached out and took his hand, her grip warm despite her exhaustion. "You saved my life yesterday. You and my baby. That does not sound like running to me. That sounds like a man who knows how to stand and fight when it matters." Garrett looked down at their joined hands, feeling that warmth in his chest again. "I am glad I was there. I am glad I could help." "So am I," Emma said softly. Over the next few days, Garrett became a constant presence at the doctor's office. He brought Emma meals from the boarding house, sat with her while she fed the baby, held Samuel when Emma needed to sleep. Doc Patterson watched all of this with knowing eyes but said nothing. Samuel was doing better than anyone had dared hope. He was eating well, gaining a little weight, his color good. Doc Patterson said the first week was the most critical for premature babies, and if Samuel could make it through that, his chances of survival would increase dramatically. Emma was healing too, though more slowly. The gunshot wound in her shoulder was painful, and she was weak from the blood loss and the difficult birth. But she was young and strong, and Doc Patterson said she would make a full recovery given time and rest. On the third day after Samuel's birth, the sheriff finally came to take Emma's statement about the shooting. He was a grizzled old man named Sheriff Daniels, with a tobacco-stained mustache and a no-nonsense manner. "Sorry to bother you, Mrs. Hartley," he said, hat in hand. "But I need to get your account of what happened for my report." Emma told him everything she could remember, which was not much. She had been walking past the bank when the shooting started. She did not see who fired the shot that hit her. "Well, all three of them robbers are dead now," Sheriff Daniels said with satisfaction. "Got what they deserved, if you ask me, and we recovered all the money they took." "Did anyone else get hurt?" Emma asked. One of the bank tellers got pistol-whipped pretty good, but he will be fine. You took the worst of it, ma'am. You are lucky to be alive. After the sheriff left, Emma was quiet for a long time, staring out the window. Garrett, sitting in his usual chair, finally asked, "What are you thinking about?" "About how much my life has changed in just a few days," Emma said slowly. "A week ago I was alone, grieving, worried about how I was going to survive once the baby came. Now Samuel is here 2 months early and I almost died, and you," she turned to look at him. "You have been here every day, every single day. Why?" It was a fair question, and Garrett had been asking himself the same thing. "I do not rightly know," he admitted. "I just know that when I think about leaving, about riding out of town like I planned, I cannot do it. I cannot leave you and Samuel alone." "But you do not know me," Emma pointed out. "We are strangers." "Does it feel that way to you?" Garrett asked. "Because it does not feel that way to me. It feels like, I do not know, like I was supposed to be here, like I was supposed to find you in that street." Emma's eyes were shining. "I have been feeling the same way. Like maybe you showing up when you did was not just luck. Like maybe it was meant to be." They looked at each other for a long moment, and Garrett felt his heart beating faster. He wanted to reach out to touch her face, to tell her that he thought he might be falling in love with her, even though that was crazy because they had only known each other a few days. But before he could say anything, Samuel started to fuss, and the moment passed. By the end of the first week, Doc Patterson declared that Samuel was out of immediate danger and that Emma could leave the doctor's office if she had somewhere to go. That was when they hit a problem. "I cannot go back to my room above the seamstress shop," Emma said, her face troubled. "It is too small, and Mrs. Henderson made it clear when I moved in that I could not have a baby there. She said the crying would disturb the customers." "What about family?" Garrett asked. "Is there anyone who could take you in?" Emma shook her head. "My parents both died when I was 18. That is when I married Thomas, and his family was never happy about the marriage. They thought he could do better than a poor orphan girl. After he died, they made it clear I was not welcome." Garrett felt anger rise in him at that. How could anyone turn their back on Emma when she needed help? "You need a place to stay," he said. "You and Samuel both. Somewhere safe and comfortable where you can rest and heal." "I know," Emma said quietly. "I have been thinking about it. I have a little money saved, and I can take in sewing again once I am feeling stronger. Maybe I can rent a small house somewhere on the edge of town." But Garrett was already shaking his head. "That is not going to work. You cannot be alone, not with a premature baby to care for and a gunshot wound that is still healing. You need help." "I do not have anyone to help me," Emma said, and there was a note of desperation in her voice now. "I am on my own. I have been on my own since Thomas died." Garrett took a deep breath, knowing what he was about to say was impulsive, maybe even crazy. But it felt right in a way nothing had felt right in years. "You are not on your own," he said. "You have me. Marry me, Emma." Emma stared at him, her mouth falling open in shock. "What, marry me?" Garrett repeated, his voice steady now. "I know it is sudden. I know we barely know each other. But I can take care of you and Samuel. I have been saving my wages for years, and I have enough to buy a small piece of land, build a house. We could make a life together." "Garrett, you do not have to do this," Emma said, tears springing to her eyes. "You do not owe me anything. You already saved my life." "This is not about owing you," Garrett said, moving closer, taking her hand. "This is about wanting to be with you. These past days, sitting here with you and Samuel, it is the first time in 17 years I have felt like I belong somewhere, like I have a purpose. I do not want to lose that. I do not want to lose you." "But you do not love me," Emma whispered. "We are practically strangers." Garrett looked at her, really looked at her, at the strength in her face, the love in her eyes when she looked at her baby, the courage it must have taken to survive everything she had been through. "Maybe I do not know what love is supposed to feel like," he said slowly. "I lost my parents before I was old enough to understand much about it. But I know that when I am with you, I feel something I have never felt before. I feel like I have come home. And if that is not love, it is the closest thing to it I have ever known." Emma was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I do not know what to say. Say yes, Garrett urged. Say you will give us a chance. We can take it slow, we do not have to rush into anything, but let me take care of you, let me be there for you and Samuel. Emma looked down at her baby who was sleeping peacefully in her arms, then she looked back at Garrett and slowly she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. The wedding took place 2 days later in Doc Patterson's office with the doctor and his wife serving as witnesses. Emma wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Patterson had lent her, and Garrett had bought a new shirt for the occasion. Samuel slept through the whole ceremony, wrapped in his blanket. The preacher, Reverend Matthews, kept it short and simple. Do you, Garrett Mackenzie, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, Garrett said, looking at Emma. And do you, Emma Hartley, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do, Emma said, her voice clear and strong. Then by the power vested in me by the state of Texas, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Garrett leaned down and kissed Emma gently, mindful of her injured shoulder and her still recovering body. It was their first kiss, and it was soft and sweet and full of promise. After the ceremony, Garrett took his new family to the boarding house where he had been staying. He had paid for a larger room, one with a proper bed and a cradle that the carpenter had hastily put together. It was not much, but it was clean and safe, and it would do until they could find something better. That first night as a married couple was strange and awkward. They were both exhausted, Emma from her ordeal and Garrett from the emotional intensity of the past week. They lay in bed together, careful not to touch, with Samuel in his cradle nearby. Are you all right? Garrett asked in the darkness. I think so, Emma said. It is just strange. A week ago I thought my life was over. Now I have a son and a husband. It does not feel real. It is real, Garrett assured her. I am here and I am not going anywhere. Emma was quiet for a moment, then said, Garrett, I want you to know that I am grateful for everything you have done, but I do not expect. I know this marriage is not like most marriages. I do not expect you to, she trailed off, embarrassed. Garrett understood what she was trying to say. Emma, I meant what I said about taking things slow. I am not expecting anything from you. We will figure this out together at our own pace. All right. All right, Emma said, and he could hear the relief in her voice. Over the next few weeks, they settled into a routine. Garrett found work at a nearby ranch, breaking horses and helping with the fall cattle drive. It was good money, and he was saving every penny he could toward buying land. Emma focused on recovering and caring for Samuel, who continued to thrive despite his premature birth. Doc Patterson said it was remarkable how well the baby was doing. He is a fighter, the doctor said with satisfaction, takes after his mother. Emma and Garrett slowly got to know each other better. They talked in the evenings after work, sharing stories about their pasts, their hopes for the future. Emma told Garrett about her childhood, growing up poor but happy, and how much she had loved her parents before they died. Garrett told her about his years on the trail, the places he had seen, the people he had known. And slowly, gradually, what had started as a marriage of convenience began to feel like something more. Garrett found himself thinking about Emma throughout the day, looking forward to coming home to her and Samuel. Emma found herself watching for Garrett's return, feeling a flutter of happiness when she heard his footsteps on the stairs. One evening, about a month after the wedding, Garrett came home to find Emma sitting by the window, nursing Samuel. The late September light was golden and soft, and it made her look almost ethereal. She looked up when he came in and smiled, and Garrett felt his heart turn over in his chest. How was your day? She asked. Long, Garrett said, sitting down heavily in the chair. We are moving the herd to the winter pasture. It will take another week at least. You look tired. I am, he admitted, but it is good work. Honest work, and Mr. Thompson, the ranch owner, he said if I keep doing well, he might offer me a permanent position, maybe even let me bring my family to live on the ranch property. That would be wonderful, Emma said, her eyes lighting up. To have a real home, not just a rented room. We will have that, Garrett promised. I swear it. You and Samuel, you deserve a real home." Emma shifted Samuel to her other breast, and Garrett politely looked away, giving her privacy. But Emma said, "You do not have to do that. Look away, I mean. You are my husband." Garrett looked back at her, at the tender scene of mother and child, and felt something deep and powerful move through him. "You are so beautiful," he said, the words escaping before he could think better of them. Emma blushed. "I am a mess. I have not had a proper bath in days, and this dress is nearly worn through." "You are beautiful," Garrett repeated firmly. "The most beautiful thing I have ever seen." They looked at each other across the small room, and the air between them felt charged with something new, something neither of them quite knew how to name yet. Samuel finished nursing and fell asleep, milk-drunk and content. Emma carefully placed him in his cradle and then stood, wincing slightly. Her shoulder was mostly healed now, but it still ached sometimes. "Let me help you," Garrett said, standing up quickly. "I am all right," Emma said, but she let him support her arm as she moved to the bed and sat down. Garrett sat beside her closer than they usually sat, and Emma did not pull away. They were both very aware of each other, of the warmth of their bodies, of the fact that they were married, that they shared this room, this bed, this life. "Emma," Garrett said softly, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "These past weeks, getting to know you, being part of your life and Samuel's life, it has changed me. I thought I was going to spend my whole life alone, just drifting from place to place. But now I cannot imagine going back to that. I cannot imagine a life without you in it." Emma's breath caught. "Garrett, I am falling in love with you," he said, the words tumbling out. "Maybe I have been falling in love with you since that first moment in the street when you looked up at me and asked me to save your baby. I do not know. But I know that what I feel for you now is real, and it is deep, and it scares me because I have never felt this way before." Emma's eyes were bright with tears. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I did not think it was possible, not after losing Thomas. I thought that part of me was dead. But then you came into my life and you were so kind, so caring. You prayed with me when I thought I was going to lose Samuel. You married me to protect me. How could I not fall in love with you?" Garrett cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "May I kiss you, really kiss you?" "Yes," Emma breathed. This kiss was different from their wedding kiss. This kiss was full of longing and need and the promise of something deeper. Garrett kissed her like she was precious, like she was everything, and Emma kissed him back with all the emotion she had been holding inside. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. "I want to be a good husband to you, Emma. And a good father to Samuel. I want to make you happy." "You already do," Emma said, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. "You already make me so happy." They lay down together that night, really together this time, wrapped in each other's arms. They did not make love, not yet. Emma was still recovering, and they both knew it was too soon. But they held each other close, and it felt like coming home, like finding the missing piece they had both been searching for without knowing it. As October arrived and the weather began to cool, Garrett's work at the ranch intensified. Mr. Thompson was so impressed with Garrett's skill with horses that he offered him exactly what he had hoped for: a permanent position as the ranch's head horsebreaker, with a small cabin on the property for his family. The cabin was nothing fancy, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it had a good stone fireplace and sturdy walls. It was about 5 miles outside of Redemption, nestled in a valley with a creek running nearby. When Garrett brought Emma and Samuel to see it for the first time, Emma cried with happiness. "It is perfect," she said, looking around the empty rooms, already imagining how she would make it into a home. "It is absolutely perfect." They moved in the following week, and slowly they made the cabin their own. Emma sewed curtains for the windows and made a quilt for their bed. Garrett built furniture, a table and chairs, shelves for Emma's few books, a better cradle for Samuel. They planted a small garden that would be ready by spring, and through it all their love continued to grow. They learned each other's habits, their likes and dislikes, their fears and dreams. Garrett learned that Emma sang when she thought no one was listening, soft lullabies for Samuel. Emma learned that Garrett talked to the horses when he worked with them, his voice low and soothing. Samuel was thriving. At 3 months old, he had caught up to where he should be developmentally, and Doc Patterson declared him completely healthy. He was starting to smile, to reach for things, to recognize his mother and Garrett. Garrett had started calling himself Samuel's father, and Emma never corrected him, because in all the ways that mattered, that was exactly what he was. One cold November evening, after Samuel had been put to bed in the loft where his cradle now resided, Garrett and Emma sat by the fire together. Emma was mending one of Garrett's shirts, and Garrett was working on a piece of leather, making a new bridle. "I have been thinking," Emma said, breaking the comfortable silence. "About us, about our marriage." Garrett looked up, his hands stilling. "What about it?" Emma set down her mending and turned to face him. "When we married, it was for practical reasons, to give Samuel a father, to give me protection and a home. But it is not like that anymore, is it?" "No," Garrett agreed. "It is not." "I love you," Emma said simply. "I love you with all my heart. And I want our marriage to be real in every way." Garrett's breath caught. He set aside the bridle and moved closer to her. "Are you sure? I do not want to rush you. I know you have been through so much." "I am sure," Emma said, reaching up to touch his face. "I have been sure for weeks now. I want to be your wife, truly. I want us to be a family, not just in name but in every way." Garrett kissed her then, pulling her into his arms, and the kiss quickly deepened, becoming heated and urgent. They made love that night for the first time, slowly and tenderly, learning each other's bodies, expressing with touch what words could never fully capture. Afterwards, lying tangled together under their quilt, Emma rested her head on Garrett's chest and listened to his heartbeat. "I did not think I could be this happy again," she murmured. "After Thomas died, after all the hardship and fear, I thought happiness was something I had lost forever." Garrett kissed the top of her head. "You gave me a reason to stop running," he said. "You and Samuel, you are my home now. The only home I need." Winter arrived in full force in December, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. But the cabin was warm and cozy, and Garrett made sure they had plenty of firewood and provisions. He continued his work with the horses, though the pace slowed during the coldest months. Christmas was a quiet affair, just the 3 of them. Garrett had carved a set of wooden animals for Samuel, who was now old enough to grab at them with his chubby fists. Emma had sewn Garrett a new shirt from fabric she had carefully saved money to buy. And Garrett surprised Emma with a beautiful shawl he had purchased in town, soft wool dyed a deep blue. "It matches your eyes," he said as he draped it around her shoulders. Emma threw her arms around him, kissing him deeply. "It is perfect. You are perfect." "Not perfect," Garrett said with a laugh, "but trying my best." As winter gave way to spring, life continued to be good. Samuel was growing fast, becoming more alert and interactive every day. He had his mother's hazel eyes and a smile that could light up a room. Garrett loved that little boy like he was his own flesh and blood, and Samuel clearly adored Garrett in return, reaching for him whenever he came into view. In March, Emma realized she was pregnant again. At first, she was terrified, remembering the trauma of Samuel's birth. But Garrett held her close and reminded her that this time was different. She was healthy, not injured, not grieving, and she would not be alone. "I will be with you every step of the way," he promised. "And Doc Patterson will be there. You are going to be fine. We are all going to be fine." Emma wanted to believe him, but the fear lingered. What if something went wrong again? What if she lost this baby, or worse, what if she died and left Samuel and Garrett alone? Garrett seemed to sense her fears. He was extra attentive, always making sure she rested enough, ate enough, did not overwork herself. He took over more of the household chores, insisting that Emma save her strength. By the time summer arrived, Emma's belly was round and obvious. Samuel was almost a year old now, walking with wobbly steps and babbling constantly. Watching Garrett with Samuel, seeing how patient and loving he was, made Emma fall even more deeply in love with him. One warm July evening, they were sitting outside the cabin watching the sunset while Samuel played in the grass nearby. Emma was resting against Garrett, his arms around her, his hands gently cradling her swollen belly. "What do you hope for?" Emma asked suddenly. "A boy or a girl?" "I do not care," Garrett said honestly. "As long as the baby is healthy and you are all right, that is all that matters to me." "But if you had to choose," Garrett thought about it. "Maybe a girl, a little girl with your smile and your strength," Emma smiled. "I think a girl would be nice. Samuel needs a sister to keep him in line." They laughed together, and in that moment, everything felt perfect. The life they had built together, the love they shared, the family they were creating, it was more than either of them had ever dared to dream of. But as Emma's due date approached in early September, her anxiety increased. She tried to hide it, but Garrett knew her too well now. He could see the fear in her eyes, the way her hand constantly moved to her belly as if to protect the baby inside. 2 weeks before the baby was due, Emma woke in the middle of the night crying. Garrett woke immediately, pulling her into his arms. "What is wrong? Is it the baby? I am scared," Emma sobbed. "I am so scared, Garrett. What if it happens again? What if something goes wrong?" Garrett held her tightly, stroking her hair. "Nothing is going to go wrong. You are healthy and strong. This baby is going to come into the world just fine." "You do not know that," Emma said, her voice breaking. "You cannot know that. Last time I almost died. Samuel almost died." "What if this time we are not so lucky?" "Look at me," Garrett said, gently tilting her face up so she had to meet his eyes. "Emma, I love you more than life itself. I am not going to let anything happen to you or our baby. Do you hear me? I am going to be right there with you, just like I was with Samuel, and we are going to get through this together. Promise me," Emma whispered. "Promise me that if something goes wrong, you will take care of Samuel. Promise me he will not be alone." "Nothing is going to go wrong," Garrett insisted. "But yes, I promise. Samuel will always be loved and protected. I swear it on my life." Emma clung to him, and they stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, drawing strength from each other. When Emma's labor started on September 15th, it was nothing like Samuel's birth. This time there was no gunshot wound, no premature contractions, no trauma. The pain started in the early morning, regular and strong but manageable. Garrett immediately rode into town to fetch Doc Patterson while Mrs. Thompson, the ranch owner's wife, came to stay with Emma and watch Samuel. Doc Patterson arrived within 2 hours, and he examined Emma with a satisfied nod. "Everything looks good, Emma. This baby is in the right position and you are progressing nicely. I would say you have a few more hours yet, but there is no reason to think this will not be a normal, healthy birth." Emma wanted to believe him, but she could not shake the fear. As the contractions grew stronger and closer together, she found herself gripping Garrett's hand so hard her knuckles turned white. "I am here," Garrett kept saying. "I am right here with you, Emma. You are doing so well." Unlike Samuel's birth, which had been a terrifying, pain-filled blur, this labor was long but steady. Emma was able to walk around between contractions, to drink water, to rest. Garrett never left her side, supporting her, encouraging her, praying silently for everything to be all right. As afternoon turned to evening, Emma's labor intensified. The contractions were coming fast and hard now, and she could feel the baby moving lower, getting ready to be born. The fear was still there, fluttering in her chest like a trapped bird, but so was a fierce determination. She was going to do this. She was going to bring this baby into the world safely. "I can see the head," Doc Patterson said, his voice excited. "Just a few more pushes, Emma. You are almost there." Emma pushed with everything she had, Garrett's voice in her ear, his hand in hers, his presence giving her strength. And then, with one final push, the baby slipped free, and a loud, healthy cry filled the room. "It is a girl," Doc Patterson announced, holding up the baby for them to see. "A beautiful, perfect little girl." Emma burst into tears, but this time they were tears of pure joy and relief. Garrett was crying too, unable to stop the emotion from overwhelming him as he watched Doc Patterson clean and wrap their daughter. "She is here," Emma sobbed. She is really here and she is all right. She is more than all right, Doc Patterson said, bringing the baby to Emma. She is absolutely perfect. The baby girl had a full head of dark hair and her father's blue-green eyes. She was bigger than Samuel had been, clearly full-term and healthy. She stopped crying as soon as Emma held her, looking up at her mother with an alert, curious expression. "Hello, little one," Emma whispered, touching her daughter's soft cheek. "Hello, my sweet girl." Garrett leaned over them both, his arms around his wife and new daughter, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. "She is beautiful, Emma, just like her mother." "What should we name her?" Emma asked, looking up at him. Garrett thought about it, looking down at his daughter's perfect little face. "What about Grace? Because she is a blessing, a grace we did not expect but needed more than we knew." "Grace," Emma repeated, testing the name. "Grace Mackenzie, I love it, it is perfect." Unlike Samuel's difficult first days, Grace thrived from the start. She nursed strongly, slept well, and filled the cabin with her presence. Samuel was fascinated by his new sister, always wanting to touch her, to see her, to be near her. Garrett had to constantly remind him to be gentle. The months that followed were busy but happy. Garrett continued his work with the horses, and Emma managed the household and cared for the children. Money was tight sometimes, but they always had enough. Mr. Thompson was a fair employer, and he had grown fond of Garrett and his family. As Grace grew, it became clear she had her father's temperament, calm and steady, while Samuel was more like Emma, passionate and intense. They were different children, but they loved each other fiercely, and watching them together never failed to make Garrett and Emma smile. By the time Grace was 6 months old and Samuel was approaching 2 years, Emma found herself pregnant again. This time, there was no fear, only excitement. She knew now that she could do this, that her body was strong, that Garrett would be there to support her. This third baby, another boy they named Daniel, was born in June of 1880 with no complications. He was a big baby, even bigger than Grace, with Garrett's blue-green eyes and Emma's dark hair. He had a loud cry and an even louder personality, making his presence known from the start. With 3 young children, life was chaotic but full of love. The little cabin often rang with laughter and the sound of children playing. Garrett built an addition onto the cabin, adding 2 more rooms so the children could have their own space as they grew. The years passed in a blur of milestones and memories. Samuel's first day helping Garrett with the horses, Grace's first words, Daniel's first steps, birthday celebrations and Christmas mornings, skinned knees and childhood illnesses that scared them but never proved serious. The slow, steady building of a life together. By 1885, Samuel was 7, Grace was 6, and Daniel was 5. Garrett and Emma had been married for 7 years, and their love had only deepened with time. They had weathered hardships together, celebrated joys together, built a family and a home together. One summer evening, after the children were asleep, Garrett and Emma sat outside the cabin watching the stars. Emma was leaning against Garrett, his arm around her shoulders, both of them content in the comfortable silence. "Do you ever think about that day?" Emma asked quietly. "The day we met, all the time," Garrett admitted. "I think about how close I came to not being there. If I had ridden out of town a day earlier, if I had been watering my horse somewhere else, I never would have seen you, we never would have met." "I think we were meant to find each other," Emma said. "I really do. It was not just luck or chance, it was fate. God knew we needed each other." Garrett tightened his arm around her. "I do not know what I did to deserve you and this life we have built, but I thank God for it every single day." "You saved me," Emma said, turning to look at him. "In every way a person can be saved. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave Samuel a father. You gave me a family and a home and a love I never thought I would have again." "You saved me too," Garrett said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was lost before I met you. I did not even know how lost I was. But you gave me a purpose, a reason to stay in one place, a reason to build something instead of just running. You made me a better man." They kissed then, a long, slow kiss that spoke of years of love and partnership and deep, abiding commitment. "I love you, Garrett Mackenzie," Emma whispered against his lips. "I love you, Emma Mackenzie," Garrett whispered back. "More than words can say." The following year, Emma surprised them all by getting pregnant again at 31. She had thought they were done having children, but apparently, God had other plans. This pregnancy was harder than the others, as Emma was older now, and the work of managing 3 active children was exhausting. But Garrett was more attentive than ever, and Samuel, Grace, and Daniel all tried to help in their own ways. In March of 1886, Emma gave birth to twin girls. The labor was long and difficult, and for a few terrifying hours, Garrett was transported back to that first night with Samuel when he had been so afraid of losing Emma. But Doc Patterson, though older now and grayer, knew his business, and both babies were born healthy. They named the twins Mary and Ruth, and their arrival brought new energy to the family. Samuel, Grace, and Daniel were old enough to be real helpers now, and they took their roles as big siblings seriously, always wanting to hold the babies, to help feed them, to make them laugh. With 5 children, the cabin was bursting at the seams, so Garrett and Mr. Thompson worked out a deal. Garrett would buy a piece of land adjacent to the ranch, 50 acres with a good water source, and Mr. Thompson would help him build a proper house. In return, Garrett would continue working with the ranch's horses and help train Mr. Thompson's sons in the trade. It took nearly a year, but by the spring of 1887, the new house was finished. It was not grand, but it was solid and spacious, with 4 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a parlor. There was a barn for the horses Garrett was starting to raise and train on his own, and a big yard for the children to play in. The day they moved into the new house, Emma stood in the middle of the empty parlor and cried. Garrett came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Happy tears, I hope?" he asked, kissing her temple. "The happiest," Emma said, turning in his arms to face him. "Do you remember when we got married? We were living in a single room at the boarding house. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a baby who had almost died. I never imagined we would have all this. We built it together," Garrett said. "Every bit of it, and we are not done yet. We have a whole life ahead of us still, and what a life it was." The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and interests. Samuel took after Garrett, drawn to the horses and the land, wanting to be a rancher like his father. Grace was smart and curious, always reading, always asking questions. Daniel was the adventurer, the one who was always climbing trees or exploring the creek, giving his parents heart attacks with his daring. Mary was the peacemaker, gentle and kind, always wanting everyone to be happy. Ruth was the spitfire, bold and fearless, charging into life with enthusiasm. Garrett and Emma watched their children grow with a mixture of pride and bittersweet nostalgia. Where had the time gone? It seemed like just yesterday Samuel had been a tiny premature baby fighting for his life. And now he was a young man of 16, tall and strong, capable of doing a full day's work alongside his father. In 1893, when Samuel was 15, he asked Garrett about his real father. Emma had always been honest with the children about Thomas, never hiding the fact that Garrett was not Samuel's biological father. But Samuel had always called Garrett his father, never questioning it. They were working together in the barn, repairing a broken stall door, when Samuel brought it up. "Can I ask you something?" Samuel said, his hands stilling on the hammer. "Of course," Garrett said, looking up from the board he was holding. "Did you ever mind that I was not really yours, that you had to take me on when you married Ma?" Garrett set down the board and turned to face Samuel fully. "First of all, you are mine. You have been mine since the day you were born, since I held your mother in that street and prayed for you to survive. And I have never, not for one single moment, felt like I had to take you on. You are my son, Samuel, in every way that matters." Samuel's eyes were shining with unshed tears. "I do not remember my real father. I wish I did, for Ma's sake. But you are the only father I have ever known, and I just want you to know that I am grateful for everything you have given me, for the man you have taught me to be." Garrett pulled Samuel into a tight hug, not caring that they were both dusty and sweaty from work. "You have nothing to be grateful for. Being your father has been one of the greatest honors of my life. I am the one who should be thanking you." It was one of those moments that Garrett knew he would remember forever, one of those perfect moments that made all the struggles and hardships worth it. As the children grew older and started having lives of their own, Garrett and Emma found themselves with more time alone together. They took walks in the evening, just the two of them, talking about everything and nothing. They still made love regularly, their passion for each other undiminished by the years. If anything, their physical relationship had deepened, become richer, informed by the deep knowledge they had of each other. In 1895, Samuel married a local girl named Catherine, and they built a small house on a corner of Garrett and Emma's land. A year later, they had a baby boy, making Garrett and Emma grandparents at 44 and 39, respectively. Holding his grandson for the first time, Garrett felt a wave of emotion so strong it nearly brought him to his knees. This tiny baby was proof of the legacy he and Emma had built, proof that their love had created something lasting and beautiful. "What are you thinking?" Emma asked, watching him with their grandson. "I am thinking about how far we have come," Garrett said softly. "I am thinking about that scared young woman in the street, bleeding and pregnant, and how I almost did not stop. I am thinking about all the ways my life could have gone differently, and how grateful I am that it went this way instead." Emma moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder as they both gazed at the sleeping baby. "I am grateful too, for all of it, for you most of all." The years continued their steady march forward. Grace married a teacher from town and moved to Redemption, where she helped run the school. Daniel, true to his adventurous nature, left home at 18 to try his luck in Montana, though he wrote regularly and visited when he could. Mary and Ruth, the youngest, were still at home in their teenage years, filling the house with their chatter and laughter. By 1900, Garrett and Emma had been married for 22 years. They were in their late 40s now, with gray starting to show in their hair and lines on their faces. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the people they had fallen in love with all those years ago. One evening in August, the anniversary of the month they had met, Garrett took Emma out to a spot by the creek on their property. He had packed a simple dinner and they sat on a blanket watching the sun go down. "You know what today is?" Garrett asked. "Tuesday," Emma guessed, laughing. "It has been exactly 22 years since I found you in that street, 22 years since our lives changed forever." Emma's expression softened. "I cannot believe it has been that long. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once." "I want you to know something," Garrett said, taking her hand. "These 22 years with you have been the best years of my life. You have given me everything I never knew I wanted: a home, a family, a purpose, a love that has sustained me through everything. I would not change a single moment of it." "Even the hard times?" Emma asked. "Even the years when money was tight or when the children were sick or when we fought?" "Especially those times," Garrett said. "Because those are the times that proved what we have is real. We have weathered every storm together and we have come out stronger for it. That is what marriage is supposed to be." Emma leaned over and kissed him, long and sweet. "I love you, Garrett Mackenzie, more today than I did yesterday, and I will love you even more tomorrow. And I love you, Emma Mackenzie, forever and always." They sat together as the stars came out, talking about their children and grandchildren, making plans for the future, reminiscing about the past. They talked about Samuel, who was doing so well with his own family and his work on the ranch. About Grace, who was expecting her second child. About Daniel's latest letter from Montana, full of stories about the wild country up north. About Mary, who was being courted by a young man from church. About Ruth, who had declared she was never getting married and was going to be a doctor instead, much to everyone's amusement and secret pride. As the night grew darker and cooler, they packed up their things and walked back to the house hand in hand. The house was quiet, with Mary and Ruth already asleep. Garrett and Emma got ready for bed, moving around each other with the easy familiarity of decades together. In bed, Emma curled up against Garrett's side, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. It was the same position she had lain in countless times over the years, and it still felt like home. "Garrett," she said softly into the darkness. "Yes." "Thank you for praying for Samuel that night, for praying for me. I do not think I ever properly thanked you for that." Garrett tightened his arms around her. "I would have done anything to save you both. I still would." "I know," Emma said. "I have always known." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the love they had built and nurtured over more than 2 decades. The early 1900s brought changes to the world around them. The wild frontier that Garrett and Emma had known was slowly disappearing, replaced by more settled towns and modern conveniences. Automobiles were starting to appear on the roads, though they were still rare. Telephones were being installed in some of the larger houses in Redemption. The world was moving forward, changing in ways that sometimes felt too fast, but on their little ranch, life continued much as it always had. Garrett still worked with horses, though Samuel did most of the heavy work now. Emma still kept the house and tended her garden, though Mary and Ruth helped more and more. They had church on Sundays, family dinners when everyone could make it, quiet evenings by the fire. In 1903, Daniel returned from Montana with a wife, a cheerful young woman named Sarah who fit right into the family. They built a house on another corner of the property, and Daniel went into partnership with his father and Samuel, expanding the horse breeding and training operation. Ruth, true to her word, went to study medicine, one of the first women to do so in that part of Texas. It was not easy and she faced significant prejudice, but she persevered, supported by her family every step of the way. When she graduated in 1905, Garrett and Emma were in the audience, bursting with pride. Mary married her young man from church, a farmer named John, and they stayed close by, adding to the growing extended family. By 1910, Garrett and Emma were grandparents to 10 grandchildren, with more on the way. Their children and grandchildren filled their lives with joy and purpose. The house that had once seemed so large now felt cozy and full during family gatherings, with multiple generations crowded around the dinner table, children running in the yard, laughter and conversation filling every room. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the whole family threw Garrett and Emma a surprise party. They gathered everyone, all the children and grandchildren, even Daniel, who came down from his place with Sarah and their kids. The house was decorated with ribbons and flowers, and there was more food than anyone could possibly eat. Standing in the middle of all that love and chaos, Emma felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She looked across the room and caught Garrett's eye. He was holding one of the younger grandchildren, a little girl who was trying to grab his nose, and he was laughing. When he saw Emma looking at him, his whole face lit up with love. Later, after everyone had gone home and they were cleaning up, Emma said, "Can you believe we did this? We created all of this." Garrett looked around at the evidence of their large, boisterous family. The toys scattered across the floor, the extra chairs still pulled up to the table, the drawings and handprints decorating the walls. "We did," he said, pulling Emma close. "And I would do it all again in a heartbeat." As they grew older, Garrett and Emma began to slow down. Garrett's body bore the marks of decades of hard physical labor, with aches and pains that did not go away as quickly as they used to. Emma's hair had gone completely gray, though Garrett thought she was more beautiful than ever. They both tired more easily, needed more rest, but their love never diminished. If anything, it grew even stronger, tempered by the years and all they had been through together. They still held hands when they walked, still kissed each other good morning and good night, still looked at each other with warmth and affection after more than 3 decades of marriage. In 1915, as the world was being torn apart by war in Europe, Garrett and Emma celebrated 37 years of marriage. They were in their 60s now, officially old by most standards. But they did not feel old, not when they were together. One morning, Garrett woke to find Emma watching him, her hand gently tracing the lines on his face. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep. "Memorizing you," Emma said softly. "Just in case." "In case of what?" "In case one day I wake up and you are not here anymore. I want to remember every detail." Garrett pulled her close, his heart aching at the thought. They were both acutely aware of their mortality now, of the fact that their time together, however long it had been, was finite. "I am not going anywhere," he said firmly. "I plan to be around for a good while yet. We have more grandchildren to spoil, remember?" Emma laughed, but there were tears in her eyes. "Promise me something, anything. Promise me that we will be grateful for every day we have together, that we will not waste a single moment." "I promise," Garrett said, kissing her forehead. "Every day with you is a gift. I have known that since the very beginning." They kept that promise. They made the most of every day, finding joy in simple things, morning coffee together on the porch, watching the sunset, visiting with their children and grandchildren, working in the garden, reading together by the fire in the evening. By 1920, they had been married for 42 years. Garrett was 74 and Emma was 65. They had 15 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. Their little ranch had grown into a successful operation, run primarily by Samuel and Daniel now, with help from some of the grandchildren. One fall evening, Garrett and Emma took a walk around their property, something they did often. They walked slowly now, Garrett using a cane and Emma holding his arm for support. But they walked, because moving and being outside in the fresh air still brought them joy. They ended up at the spot by the creek where Garrett had taken Emma on their 22nd anniversary. It was still one of their favorite places, peaceful and beautiful. "Do you remember the first time I told you I loved you?" Garrett asked, sitting down carefully on a fallen log. "Of course," Emma said, sitting beside him. "It was in the boarding house about a month after we married. You said you were falling in love with me. And you said you were falling in love with me too," Garrett remembered, smiling. "I was so scared to say it. I thought maybe it was too soon, that you would think I was foolish." "I thought you were brave," Emma said. "I thought you were the bravest man I had ever met, to be so honest about your feelings." "I have loved you every day since then," Garrett said, taking her hand. "And I will love you every day for whatever time we have left. And I will love you," Emma said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for finding me that day, Garrett. Thank you for stopping when you saw me in the street. Thank you for saving Samuel and for making us a family." "Thank you for letting me," Garrett said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving me a life worth living." They sat together as the sun set, 2 old people who had loved each other well for more than 4 decades, grateful for every moment they had been given. Garrett lived to see his 78th birthday, passing away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1924 with Emma beside him. His last words to her were the same words he had said countless times over their 46 years of marriage. "I love you." Emma, heartbroken but grateful for the life they had shared, lived another 5 years. She was surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, all of them loving her and caring for her. She never remarried, saying that Garrett had been her one true love and she needed no other. When Emma passed away in 1929 at the age of 74, she was laid to rest beside Garrett in the cemetery in Redemption. Their graves looked out over the town where they had met, where their story had begun all those years ago. On Emma's headstone, beneath her name and dates, Samuel had inscribed a simple message. "Beloved mother, grandmother, and wife, she was saved by love, and she saved others with love in return." The legacy of Garrett and Emma lived on through their children and grandchildren. Samuel continued to run the ranch, passing it down eventually to his own children. Grace's children all became teachers, carrying on her love of learning. Daniel's family stayed on the land, working the horses just as Garrett had taught him. Mary's children were known for their kindness, just like their mother. And Ruth became a respected doctor, helping countless people over her long career. But more than the material legacy, more than the land or the money or the success, what Garrett and Emma passed down was the example of their love. They had shown their family what it meant to truly love someone, to commit to them through everything, to build a life together based on respect and partnership and deep affection. Their story, which began with a gunshot and a prayer, which continued through hardship and joy, which ended with two people who had loved each other well for nearly half a century, became a story that was told and retold through the generations. Great-grandchildren who had never met them knew about Garrett and Emma, about how they met, about the love they shared. And in every generation, in every marriage, in every moment when someone chose love over fear, chose commitment over convenience, chose to stay and fight for what mattered rather than run away, the legacy of Garrett and Emma lived on, because in the end, that is what love does. It transforms. It endures. It creates something lasting and beautiful out of the most unlikely circumstances. It takes two broken people and makes them whole. It turns strangers into soulmates, turns a chance meeting into a lifetime of devotion. Garrett and Emma's love story was not perfect. They faced hardships and struggles, made mistakes and had regrets. But they faced it all together, and that made all the difference. They built something real and lasting, something that outlived them and touched countless lives. And it all started with a cowboy who stopped when he saw a woman in need, who held her close when she was scared, who prayed beside her bed when her baby's life hung in the balance. It started with a choice to care, to stay, to love. That is the power of love. That is the miracle of two people finding each other at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right way. That is the story of Garrett and Emma Mackenzie, and it is a story worth remembering, worth telling, worth celebrating. Because their love saved not just Emma and baby Samuel on that dusty street in Redemption, Texas in 1878. It saved Garrett too. It saved all of them, creating a family and a legacy that would last for generations to come, and that, in the end, is what matters most.